Hello, second grade. Welcome back to a new week of learning. This is your Wit and Wisdom lesson for Monday, April 6th. I am so glad to have you back with me today. This week, we are going to be starting a new module for Wit and Wisdom, which means we get to start a whole new set of books. So we have 6 books that we are going to read in this module. Hopefully we will get through them all before the end of the year. We will see if we can get as far as we possibly can. But I think that you are going to really like this module. It has got some really fun books and it's some kind of fun subject matter. So let's get right into our learning. I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's see if I can get this a little bit faster this time. There we go. I think we're ready to go. All right. So before we get started for this week, let's review. Last week I introduced these things to you to get started before we start learning. So each day we want to get our brain ready to go. So let's start with taking a deep breath. I want you to be ready to think. I want you to be ready to share your ideas with your learning partner. I want you to try and stay as focused as you can. If you need to take a quick break, you can always pause the video and stand up and take a little stretch break and then come back. That's a good thing about learning virtually. And I want you to look forward to what we are going to learn for the day. What do you need? Before we get started this week, we have a few supplies that you need to make sure that you have out. Number one, for Wit and Wisdom, or any of your studies for that matter, I'd like you to have a quiet space to concentrate. Your paper or your notebook and a pencil, so you will need to find the papers that you used last week to write in, so use those papers or your notebook from last week. This week, you should have your blue Wit and Wisdom workbook. So your parents may have come by the school and picked up your workbooks from school for this week. If they did, that's great. You will have them. If you don't have them, there's nothing too complicated this week that you can't just jot it down in your notebook. And then you can get your workbooks at a later time, or you can always print the worksheets from the internet if you need them. But we will make it work either way. You have a learning partner, so you're going to need somebody with you to help discuss your work with and perhaps help you with technology just a little bit. Okay, if you need any of these things, go ahead and pause the video now and you can go get your supplies, and I'll see you back in a minute. For this week, we have a few objectives that we are going to be focused on, for just today. These are just our objectives for today, not for a whole week, These are just for today. So today, by the end of our time together, you should be able to notice and wonder about the new module text. We've done this for the last 3 modules, so you guys are experts at this, I am sure, by now, of noticing and wondering, because we do that a lot in second grade. You should be able to listen actively to the first few pages of a book that we are going to read called Good Enough to Eat. You should be able to make some observations, both to your learning partner, and be able to write them down in your notebook about the first few pages of the book. And you should be able to write some of those questions using the questions that are on our Wonder Wheel that we've talked about the last couple of modules, using questions like who, what, when, where, and how. Okay, as we get started, let me move myself maybe just a little bit here. There we go. One of the things I want you to think about, have you ever went grocery shopping with a friend or a family member? Well, I go shopping all the time for my family, and I'm sure that your family members go shopping all the time for you, but have you ever gone with them? If you have or haven't, that's okay. But I want you to pretend that you are going to be going to the grocery store today, and you are going to make a list for shopping of about 5 to 7 items that you would buy if you went to the grocery store. So you're making a list of 5 to 7 food items. So you might want to pause the video now and make that list on your notebook paper. Once you have made your list, I want you to think about or discuss with your learning partner, why did you choose those items? You may have chose those because they were your favorite food, or maybe you were just thinking right now, maybe you chose cookies because you were wanting something sweet right now, or maybe you were thinking I would buy stuff to make a sandwich because it's almost lunchtime, or you're ready for a snack, or you're thirsty. Who knows? You would have chose these items for different reasons. And I want you to think about, do these items nourish your body? Okay. Don't spend a lot of time on that. Just for about 30 seconds, think about why you chose those items. Once you have those things chosen, on your paper, I would like for you to write this sentence, and I want you to fill in that blank. Food makes me able to what? What does food make you able to do? I want you to fill in as many words. You can just make a list and see, food makes me able to, and down the side underneath of that blank, what does food make you able to do? Think of a couple of different things you could fill in. You can pause the video and do that now. Some of the things that I thought food made me able to do, I said food makes me able to have energy. Food makes me able to focus on my learning. Those are a couple of ideas that I had while you were working on yours. I wish I could hear your ideas, but I will see some of them later, hopefully in our exit ticket. During this entire module, this is going to be our essential question. So you also should be experts and used to seeing the essential question. This is what we're going to be thinking about the entire module. By the end of all of these books and lessons, we will be able to answer this question, hopefully in more than one way. We eat food for lots of different reasons. So, how does food nourish us? Look at that sentence and see if there's any words in there that might seem like they are new to you. I am looking at this sentence. How does food nourish us? One of the words that I noticed, the word nourish. That might be a word that is new to some of you. If it is, how could you figure out what that word means if you didn't know? Maybe I could look at some of the words surrounding it in the context clues. I might look at the word food. So nourish must have something to do with food. Okay. Well, vocabulary word I want you to add into your notebook for now. Your vocabulary word is nourish. So in your notebook, I want you to write down the word nourish and its meaning: to provide food needed to live, grow, and stay healthy. Oh, so how does food help us live, grow, and stay healthy? Pause your video and write this vocabulary word and its meaning in your notebook. This is going to be a word we think about our entire module, so it's very important that we know what this word means. So pause the video and write this in your notebook. Okay, I am going to switch back to me. Let's see. Okay, so before we start reading our book, I thought, because all of your teachers are now on YouTube and you're watching this lesson on YouTube, and lots of people unbox things on YouTube that they've gotten in the mail, I thought that I would do an unboxing really quickly of some of our books that we will be reading this module. So here I got my box from Amazon. It came in the mail. Let's open it up and see what I got. I'm so excited. I have hopefully some books in here to show you. I'm going to open my box. Here's my box. I opened it up. What's inside of my box? some nice tissue paper. Go here. Some tissue paper. Let's see what's, I'm gonna open my tissue paper. Let's just take it out. I'm gonna take out what is wrapped up. Everything is all wrapped up. Outside the box that they came in. Let's see what I got. Oh my goodness. In my big Amazon box came a whole stack of books. Look at these books. I got one called The Digestive System. One called Bone Button Borscht. That's a weird word. Stone Soup. I don't want to eat a soup with stones in it. That might be an interesting book. Oh, another book about the digestive system. This one here with this guy with a plate, good enough to eat. Oh, and this last one I got, the vegetables we eat. Oh, who likes to eat vegetables? I know I've seen lots of you eating vegetables for snacks and at lunchtime at school. Hopefully you're still eating all of those good healthy snacks at home as we start to work on this next module. So let me share my screen with you one more time. Okay. Here's a picture of all of the books that I just got in my Amazon box. I would like, I'm gonna make myself go away there. I would like for you guys to look at all of these book covers and pause your video and with your learning partner, take a look at them. Tell them a couple things you notice about each of these book covers and maybe something that you wonder about all of these books. Do you think there is something that all of these books might have in common? So think about that. What do all of these books have in common that we are going to be reading this time? Pause your video and talk to your learning partner. Okay, before we move on to read a little bit about our book, I would like for you in your notebook, I move myself up to the corner there. I would like for in your notebook or on your piece of paper for you to draw a quick notice and wonder chart. Okay, you guys are experts at doing notice and wonder charts this time of year. You don't need to draw these little pictures on there or the descriptions. You can make your T-chart in your notebook and you can even just put an N and a W. And I'm sure at this point you will know that that means notice and wonder. So pause your video and make your notice and wonder chart. When we come back, I will be ready for us to move on to our noticing, wondering about the books. Okay, we are going to explore this first book, Good Enough to Eat. That was one of the ones that came in my box. I have that one right here with me. And while we are reading this book, I want you to be thinking about how does food nourish us? Okay, how does food nourish us? Let's watch a little video to help us learn a little more about this book. Make sure.
You will notice and wonder about a small part of the text Good Enough to Eat. You will then return to the entire text later in the module. I am going to show you a few illustrations from this book. Before I show you a few illustrations from this book, though, I want you to keep in mind two questions that I'd like you to think about as we look at each of these pages. The first is, what group do all of these foods belong to? The second is, did I choose foods from all of these groups when I made my list of favorite foods? Why or why not? If you would like to discuss these questions with a learning partner after I show each of the illustrations, please pause the video after I display the first two pages. I will repeat the questions just in case you do not remember them once the illustration is displayed. Here are our first two pages, pages 2 and 3. Take a moment to think, what are all of these foods? Did you choose foods from all of these groups when you wrote and drew your favorite foods? Why or why not? Pause the video so you can discuss these questions with your learning partner. Now let's take a look at pages 38 and 39. What are all of these foods on here? Did you choose foods from all of these groups when you wrote and drew your favorite foods? Why or why not? Pause the video now if you are able to discuss these questions with a learning partner. Now I am going to read a page from the book Good Enough to Eat. When I read this page, I want you to think about what foods do you notice on this page and what do you notice about the title? Here is page 5 from Good Enough to Eat. What foods do you notice on this page? What do you notice about the title? On a piece of paper or your response journal, write down your thoughts to these two questions. Pause the video so you can write your thoughts about the food you noticed and what you notice about the title. I am now going to read several pages aloud. As I read, I would like you to think about what you notice about this part of the text. Babies cry when they're hungry. Dogs bark and howl. When you feel hungry, your stomach grumbles, your legs feel weak. You don't cry or howl, but sometimes you feel cranky. In the nick of time, your dinner is ready. It looks good, it smells good, it tastes good. As soon as you eat, you feel better. Hunger sends you strong signals. It lets you know that eating is the most important thing you do each day. The food you eat and drink keeps you alive. It builds, protects, and energizes your body. Food makes you able to grow, think, breathe, move, stay cool, stay warm, fight germs, achoo, heal, and live. What do you notice and wonder about the pages I just read? Just take a few moments to think silently. Give me a thumbs up if you actually really thought about all the things that food makes you able to do, or how you feel when you're hungry, or the signals you get when you're hungry. We just read pages 6 through 11. And earlier, we thought about our favorite foods and how they may belong to different food groups. One way to think about food is how different foods fit into different groups. Another way is to think about the food and how they're similar between different food groups. Think back to how you filled in the sentence frame in the welcome activity. That sentence frame you completed earlier was, food makes me able to blank. You fill this out with all the different ways that food makes you able to do something. How has your thinking about what food makes you able to do changed since we started this lesson? Take a few moments to share your new thoughts with your learning partner and how it's changed about what food makes you able to do. Pause the video now and share with your learning partner. We have already made observations about the text as we thought about what we noticed. Now, we are going to begin thinking about what we wonder by asking some questions about the text. Before we get started, you will need to make the graphic organizer you see here on the screen. In just a moment, you're going to pause the video to make this graphic organizer. We will need it for our next portion of the lesson. Pause the lesson now and create the graphic organizer that you see on the screen. Make sure to include the title, Wonders for Good Enough to Eat by Lizzie Rockwell, as well as the headings, Questions, Answers in Progress, and Complete Answers. Pause the video now to create this graphic organizer. In just a few moments, I will be reading Good Enough to Eat, but just pages 1 through 11 at this time. As I'm reading, I'd like you to jot down questions in this graphic organizer. When jotting down your questions, please make sure to use this column only. Do not write in the Answers in Progress box or Complete Answers box. This is because we'll use this in later lessons as we continue to read the text Good Enough to Eat. Before I start reading, let's review some question words that you should use when you start to write down the questions as I read. As you see here, we ask questions by using question words. You can ask why, as in why is pasta a grain, using the question word why. Other question words include who, where, when, what, and how. Make certain to start your questions with one of these words as you record them on your chart and as I read pages 1 through 11. Good Enough to Eat, A Kid's Guide to Food and Nutrition by Lizzie Rockwell. Remember, as I continue to read, write down anything you wonder or have a question about. Bread, cereal, rice, and pasta. Vegetables. Fruits. Good Enough to Eat, A Kid's Guide to Food and Nutrition by Lizzie Rockwell. Babies cry when they're hungry. Dogs bark and howl. When you feel hungry, your stomach grumbles, your legs feel weak. You don't cry or howl, but sometimes you feel cranky. Wah! In the nick of time, your dinner is ready. It looks good. It smells good. It tastes good. As soon as you eat, you feel better. Hunger sends you strong signals. It lets you know that eating is the most important thing you do each day. The food you eat and drink keeps you alive. It builds, protects, and energizes your body. Food makes you able to grow, think, breathe, move, stay cool, stay warm, fight germs, achoo, heal, and live.
You may have noticed on this page our sentence frame that we saw earlier. So this may have given you some ideas if you were having a hard time filling in that sentence frame earlier. At the very bottom, the last sentence says, food makes you able to, we said that, food makes me able to, and then look, it gave you all of these ideas in our book, like grow, think, breathe, move, heal, live, fight germs, stay cool, stay warm and healthy. So lots of ideas here of things that food might make you able to do, in case you were struggling with ideas to fill in that sentence earlier.
Now that I've read pages 1 through 11, take a moment to write at least 2 questions about good enough to eat. You're going to write at least 2 questions about good enough to eat, if you have not done so already, as I read, in the graphic organizer that we created before I began to read. Remember, Write your 2 questions here in these columns only. Pause the video now to write your 2 questions.
I would only
I
write
really
2 questions.
wish I could see what you record.
I would only write your two questions in there, even though she shows 4 boxes. I would only write 2 because you're going to want to save some space for the rest of the book when we read the remainder of the story tomorrow.
I'm going to share my own questions that I had as I read the text. But don't worry, if your questions are not the same as mine, that is okay. I'm only sharing these questions and what I came up with to get a discussion going with you and give you a chance to compare what you wrote with someone else's writing. These are the 4 questions that I came up with. Notice as I wrote my questions, I put page 5. I understand that's a little easier for me to do than you, but if you'd like to go back and do that, after I finish reviewing my questions, please feel free to go back a little bit in this video, look at the page numbers that your questions were based on, and then put them next to your question. My first question is, what is a kid's guide? What is nutrition? Is my second question. Why does eating make me feel better? And I noticed that on page 9, so that's why I wanted to ask that question. And how does food help me stay cool and warm? I had that question after I read page 11. We will read the rest of this text during later lessons. At that time, you will have a chance to add questions if you'd like to ask some additional questions based on what we read. But you would also have some time to think about what questions have been answered and what questions we still haven't gotten to yet. And we'll add to that chart, or this chart, at that time. If you would like to add your page numbers, or if you would like to add any of my questions to your chart, pause the video now to do so.
Okay. Well, that book looked pretty exciting. I can't wait to read the rest of it. Let me close this out because we don't need that anymore. Now that we have read a little bit of our first text, I want us to go back and look at these pictures. What are some things that you think all of our books might be having in common during this module? Some things that I noticed if I looked at all of these books, obviously now our first book was all about food. I see this book is about vegetables. This one's about soup. I'm not sure what bone button borscht is, but this guy looks like he's cooking something. So something tells me these are all about food. The digestive system, I'm not quite sure necessarily what those have to do with these other food things. But we're talking about food in our body. So maybe these have to do with my body and food. So let's continue. If you still wanted to fill some things in about these on your Notice and Wonder chart that you drew of some things you noticed and wondered about all of the books in this module, you can pause the video and do that. For our last part of our lesson today, I wanted to introduce you to our fluency passage this week. Last week we read the speech from Martin Luther King and his March on Washington. This week we have some fluency that's actually from one of the paragraph that's from one of our books that's in this module. So it has to do with food. So when we are doing fluency, you are going to want to read this with your learning partner or with your pet or your grandma or your grandpa or brother or sister in person or on the phone a couple of times each day. So in your blue book, if you have your blue book, it is on page 2A. So you should have gotten this new module book. And you'll open it up and you will find 2A in here. There's actually two different options. You can choose if you want to read option A, or if you would like to read option B, or if you're really up for a big challenge, you can read both of them. It is totally up to you. If you do not have your blue book yet, I will put the fluency passage up on the screen in a moment so you can pause it and have it to look at on our screen. I want you to be able to read it 3 to 5 times with your partner. Focus on appropriate phrasing, so you're not running all of your sentences together. Using good expression, that means your voice is going to go up and down. It might get faster or slower to convey the meaning of your words or the mood of what you're reading. The volume. Sometimes you might get more quiet or more loud while you're reading. Make sure your speed is moderate. That means it's not too fast and it's not too slow. It's just right for people to understand what you are saying. Here is the fluency passage. So if you don't have your blue book, you would want to pause your video or go back at a later time and look at this so that you can read it. Otherwise, it is in your book on page 2A. And there's 2 different options. You can choose option A, option B, or you can choose to do both if you're up for a challenge. But you'll notice that there's a little sheet for your listening partner to score you each day on the back of those pages. All right, let's look back on what we worked at today and see if we can answer all of the questions that we talked about at the beginning of the lesson. What did you notice the module text had in common? You should be able to answer that question now. In common, what did they have? We talked about they all had food in common, right? Or the body in some way. What observations did you make about the first few pages of the book? What are some things that you wrote down in your Notice and Wonder chart about the first few pages of the book? Did you write 2 questions about the text using who, what, when, where, and how? I am confident that you did all of these things wonderfully. You will have some of these questions might show up in your exit ticket today, so I can see how well you are doing on our first lesson of Module 4. I am going to give you our next steps. So you're going to need to complete the Lesson 4 exit ticket that was emailed, a link to your parents. Stand up and give yourself a hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray. You have done such a good job at this last week of learning to follow along with your lessons virtually. Thank your learning partner. Turn to your learning partner and give them a big thank you for helping you to learn at home when we cannot be together. And lastly, homework. Find something to read that interests you for 20 minutes today. It doesn't have to be right now. It can be whenever you have time. Make sure that you continue to get your eyes on text as one of the most important things that you can do to keep your mind working well and be sharp for 3rd grade. If you have any questions, here is how your parents can get a hold of me. They can email me and we can set up a time to talk by phone, email, or I can even set up a face-to-face meeting with you. I think that is it for today. I'm going to come back to you. Stop sharing. There we go. All right. Well, that's our lesson for today. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good afternoon or evening, whichever time it is that you're doing your lessons. I miss you all, and I'll see you soon. Bye, 2nd grade.